The massive space station, called Nexus Prime, floated in the darkness of space, its crystal towers shining like diamonds against the black void. For 10,000 years, this place had been the center of all power in the galaxy. Here the Etherean Empire ruled over countless worlds and billions of creatures. High Counselor Velthar stood in the Great Hall, his tall blue form towering over the holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. His 6 eyes studied the swirling map with the patience of someone who had lived for centuries. Round him, representatives from 11 other alien species waited in silence. Together, they formed the Council of 12, the most powerful beings. In known space, another primitive world has discovered space travel, Velthor announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. The hologram zoomed in on a small yellow star at the edge of the galaxy. The third planet from this star, the creatures. They call themselves humans. Several council members made dismissive sounds. They had seen this story play out hundreds of times before. Young species would reach for the stars with crude technology, fight among themselves, and eventually destroy their own civilizations. It was as predictable as the orbits of planets. Commander Nixara stepped forward from her position near the great windows. Her 4 arms folded across her chest in the traditional salute. She was one of the Empire's finest military officers, with silver skin that gleamed under the artificial lights and eyes that missed nothing. "What are your orders, High Counselor?" she asked. "Standard Protocol 7, Velthar replied without hesitation. "Place monitoring stations around their system. Watch them, record their activities. They will destroy themselves within a few centuries, just like all the others." Nixara bowed deeply. She had carried out this same protocol dozens of times during her long career. The Empire had a simple rule: let the primitive species burn themselves out, then move in to claim their worlds and resources. It was efficient and clean, but as she walked to her command center, something felt different this time. The surveillance data flowing across her screens showed these humans spreading across multiple worlds with unusual speed. Their ships were indeed primitive, held together with metal plates and chemical rockets that looked like toys compared to Etherean technology, yet they kept building more of them, launching them toward distant stars with a determination that seemed almost desperate. Most species the Empire observed were careful, sending 1 or 2 ships to test the waters of space travel. These humans were different. They launched dozens of ships at once, as if they were racing against time itself. Their colonies were rough and poorly planned, but they kept building them anyway. Nixara watched a human construction crew working on a space station near their 4th planet. The structure was ugly and functional, nothing like the elegant spires of Etherean architecture. But the humans worked without stopping. Even when their primitive tools broke down, they fixed them and kept going. "Curious," she murmured to herself. Her assistant, a young officer named Kixtel, looked up from his station. "Commander?" "Look at this data," Nixara said, pointing to the screen.
Oh.
"These humans have been in space for less than 50 years. Most species take centuries to establish even one permanent colony. These creatures have built settlements on 17 different worlds." Kixtel studied the information with fresh eyes. "Their expansion rate is unusual," he admitted. "But surely their technology will fail them soon." "Those ships barely look space-worthy." Nixara nodded, but she continued watching. The humans seemed to make their technology work through pure, stubborn effort. When their ships broke down, they didn't abandon them. They took them apart, figured out what went wrong, and built better ones. When their colonies faced disasters, they didn't give up. They found ways to survive and keep growing. Over the following months, Nixara found herself spending more time studying the human data than any other assignment. She watched them argue among themselves, sometimes violently, but then come together when faced with external threats. She saw them risk their lives to save strangers, even when logic said they should abandon them. One incident particularly caught her attention. A human mining ship had suffered a catastrophic failure near an asteroid field. The crew was trapped with limited oxygen, too far from any rescue station. Instead of writing them off as lost, 3 other human ships immediately changed course. To attempt a rescue, The mission was dangerous and expensive. With little chance of success, the Etherean way would have been to record the loss and move on. Resources were too valuable to waste on doomed rescue attempts. But the humans spent days in the dangerous asteroid field, finally managing to save most of the trapped crew. They celebrated the rescue as if they had won a great victory, even though it had cost them time and valuable fuel. "They are not like the others," Nixera told Velthor during her monthly report. The High Counselor barely looked up from his other duties. "They all seem unique at first, Commander. Give them time. They will show their true nature soon enough." But Nixara was no longer certain. These humans seemed to possess something the Empire had forgotten in its 10,000 years of rule: the willingness to fight for others, even when victory seemed impossible. As she filed her reports and maintained the monitoring stations, a small part of her wondered what would happen if the Empire ever had to face such determination directly. She would not have to wonder for long. 3 years had passed since the Empire began watching the humans. Captain Lee Daeho adjusted his position in the pilot seat of the exploration ship Terra Nova as they approached the Kepler system. The ship was small compared to the massive colony vessel New Sol that followed behind them. But it was the most advanced craft humanity had ever built. Lee had been chosen to lead his mission because of his calm nature and diplomatic skills. The United Earth government hoped that if they encountered other intelligent life, someone like Lee could make peaceful contact. He had studied every known protocol for first meetings between species, though all of it was just theory since humans had never met aliens before. Behind him, the New Sol carried 15,000 colonists heading to establish humanity's first settlement outside their home star system. Families, scientists, engineers, and dreamers who had volunteered to leave Earth forever to build something new among the stars. Lee felt the weight of their trust as he guided both ships deeper into unknown space. "Captain," called out his communications. "Officer Lieutenant Park Minsu, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings ahead. They don't match anything in our databases." Before Lee could respond, space around them suddenly filled with ships. Not human ships. These vessels were sleek and beautiful, made of materials that seemed to bend light around them. They appeared without warning, as if they had been invisible just moments before. "How many?" Lee asked, trying to keep his voice steady.
"Oh,
"Sir, all much larger than ours." Park's hands moved quickly over his controls. "They're surrounding us." Admiral Park Ji-woo, commanding the colony mission from the New Sol, opened a communication channel between the two ships. "Captain Lee." "What's our situation?" "We have visitors, Admiral." "I think we just made first contact." Lee activated every communication system his ship had. He broadcast greetings in dozens of Earth languages, mathematical sequences, and musical patterns. Anything that might show these aliens that humans came in peace. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then the alien ships responded. The message came through in perfect human language, which surprised everyone. "Primitive vessels, you have entered restricted space. Submit to inspection and prepare for relocation." The voice was cold and commanding, like someone speaking to disobedient children. Lee felt his diplomatic training kick in despite his nervousness. "This is Captain Lee Daeho, representing the United Earth government. We come in peace and request the opportunity for formal diplomatic contact between our species." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice returned, sounding almost amused. "You will comply with relocation orders immediately. Resistance will result in destruction." Admiral Park's voice came through the CUM system, tight with barely controlled anger. "They're treating us like criminals. We understand this may be your territory. We're willing to negotiate and follow proper procedures. Please allow us to establish peaceful relations." The response came not in words, but in action. Bright energy beams lanced out from the nearest alien ship, striking the New Sol's engines. The massive colony vessels shuddered and began losing power. "They're targeting our life support systems," Park reported from the colony ship. "We have families aboard. Children." Lee made a decision that would change everything. Instead of surrendering, he ordered his small ship to position itself between the aliens and the colony vessel. "This is wrong," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We came in peace. You're attacking innocent people." Commander Nixera watched from her flagship as the tiny human vessel tried to protect the larger colony ship. The humans should have surrendered immediately when faced with superior technology. That was how these encounters always went. But this small ship was actually moving to shield the others, even though it meant certain destruction. Her orders were clear. The humans had entered Etherean space and refused to comply with relocation commands. Standard procedure was to destroy any ship that showed resistance. But something about the human captain's words bothered her. "Commander," her weapons officer reported, "the small ship is hailing us directly. Put it through." Lee's voice came through the communication system, steady despite the impossible situation he faced.
Ow.
"I don't know who you are or why you're attacking us, but those people on the colony ship are families. They have children aboard. Whatever laws we've broken, whatever territory we've entered, they don't deserve to die for it." Nixara had heard many final messages from doomed species. They usually begged for mercy or tried to bargain with resources. This human was asking for the lives of others, not his own. But orders were orders. Empire's authority could not be questioned. She gave the command to fire. The new soul exploded in a brilliant flash of light. 15,000 human colonists died in seconds, their dreams of a new world ending in the cold vacuum of space. The smaller ship, Terra Nova, Nixara felt something she had not experienced in centuries of military service. The humans had died trying to protect each other, not fighting for conquest or resources, but for the simple idea that innocent people should not suffer. The report she filed that day was brief and official, but it failed to capture what she had really witnessed. For the first time, the Empire had encountered a species that valued others more than themselves, and they had just declared war on them. 5 years of war had changed everything. Captain Cho Minho floated weightless in the command center of his ship, the Ghost Dancer, as it drifted silently through an asteroid field deep in Etherean territory. His crew worked quietly around him, their movements practiced and efficient after years of running secret missions behind enemy lines. The war had not gone as anyone expected. The Etherean Empire thought they would crush human resistance in weeks. Instead, humanity had done something that surprised everyone, including themselves. They learned to fight dirty. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Song Dejin from her station. "We're picking up the signal from the data station. It's exactly where our contact said it would be." Cho nodded and moved to look at the scanner display. This wasn't a military base or a weapons factory. This was something much more valuable. It was a data storage center that contained the guiding younger species toward enlightenment. They said they only used force when primitive worlds threatened the galaxy's harmony. But human intelligence had discovered hints of a darker truth. This hidden station contained records going back thousands of years. "How many guards?" Cho asked. "Just 2 patrol ships. They're not expecting anyone to find this place." His ship was small and fast, built from salvaged Etherean technology and human engineering. Like all the vessels in the Ghost Squadron, it was designed for stealth. In quick strikes, not direct combat. "We only need a few minutes to download everything." The Ghost Dancer slipped between the asteroids like a shadow. Joe's crew had become experts at this kind of work. They moved through space without using their main engines, instead using tiny maneuvering thrusters that were almost impossible to detect. It was dangerous work that required perfect timing and steady nerves. The data station looked like a large crystal floating in space, surface covered with the elegant curves that marked all Etherean architecture. But inside that beautiful shell were secrets that could change the war. "We're in range," Song reported. "Beginning data transfer now." As the information flowed into their computers, Cho watched the readouts with growing amazement. The files contained detailed records of over 200 species that had encountered the Etherean Empire over the past 5,000 years. But these weren't stories of peaceful contact and guidance. There were records of conquest, slavery, and genocide. Species after species had been destroyed or enslaved when they refused to submit to Etherean rule. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, their worlds stripped of resources, their people forced into labor camps or simply eliminated. The Empire had been built on the bones of countless innocent races. "Captain, this is incredible," Song whispered as she read the data. The Vorthok crystal miners weren't volunteers. They were enslaved. 3,000 years ago, the Zephyrian gas workers in the Outer Rim, the Mekatar cybernetic units, dozens of other species, they're all slaves. Cho felt a cold anger building in his chest. The Empire had portrayed itself as civilization's guardian, but it was really just a massive slave operation disguised as enlightened rule, and now they were trying to do the same thing to humanity? "Download everything," he ordered. "Every file, every record, every piece of evidence." As the data transfer completed, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The Etherian guards had finally detected their presence, but it was too late. The Ghost Dancer was already moving, slipping back into the asteroid field with its precious cargo. "Set course for the broadcast point," Cho commanded. "What?" "It's time the galaxy learned the truth." 3 hours later, Cho made a decision that would reshape the war. Instead of taking the stolen data back to human command, he broadcast it across every inhabited system in the galaxy. The transmission was powerful enough to reach thousands of worlds, and the evidence was undeniable. On Nexus Prime, Commander Nixera watched in horror as the Empire's carefully constructed lies crumbled before her eyes. The broadcast showed detailed records of species she had been told were willing partners in the Empire's grand design. Instead, she learned they were prisoners, forced to work in dangerous conditions while their children were taken away and raised as loyal servants. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On mining worlds throughout the galaxy, Orthok workers stopped their digging and began destroying the equipment that had enslaved them for millennia. Zephyrian gas harvesters seized control of their orbital platforms and declared independence. Even the Mekatar, whose minds had been partially controlled by Etherian technology, found ways to break their programming and join the growing rebellion. But the most shocking development came from within the Empire itself. Younger Etherian officers, those who had believed in their civilization's noble mission, began questioning their orders. Some even switched sides, bringing their ships and crews to join the rebellion. The Council of 12 met in emergency session. As reports of uprisings flooded in from across their territory, for the first time in 10,000 years, their absolute authority was being challenged not by one primitive species, but by dozens of worlds acting together. High Counselor Velthair stood before the holographic display that now showed red warning lights on half the galaxy. The empire that had seemed eternal was cracking, and it was all because one small human ship had decided to tell the truth. The stars were no longer bowing to Etherian will. They were blazing with the fire of revolution. The final battle for Nexus Prime began with the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Fleet Admiral Kim Hyjin stood on the command bridge of her flagship, the Soul's Revenge, watching as thousands of ships took their positions around the Etherian capital. But these weren't just human vessels. Flying alongside them were ships from dozens of species that had broken free from Empire control. Captain Zhang Sua commanded the destroyer Bizen's Pride at the front of the attack formation. Next to her flew a massive Vorthok crystal ship that sparkled like a diamond in space. On her other side, Zephyrian energy beings had formed their own vessels from pure light and gas. Behind them came the Mekatar fleet, their cybernetic ships bristling with weapons they had turned against their former masters. "All ships report ready," Kim announced over the communications network. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the weight of history in her words. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The space around Nexus Prime was filled with Etherian defenses. Massive battle stations floated like deadly flowers, their weapons trained on the approaching rebel fleet. Energy barriers shimmered between the crystal towers of the capital, protecting the heart of an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. But Kim had learned something important during the 5 years of war. The Etherians were used to fighting enemies one at a time. Had never faced a coordinated attack from multiple species working together. Their rigid command structure, which had given them strength for millennia, was now their weakness. "Begin." "The attack," Kim ordered. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships used their hit-and-run tactics to draw Etherian fire, while Vorthok crystal vessels absorbed energy weapons and redirected them back. At their targets, Zephyrian fighters moved through solid matter, appearing inside enemy ships to disable them from within. The Mekatar used their perfect coordination to execute complex maneuvers that confused the Etherean defense systems. On Nexus Prime's command, Bridge Commander Nixara watched her Empire's defenses crumble. The rebels weren't just fighting harder than expected. They were fighting smarter, using tactics that the Empire had never encountered because they had never faced a truly united enemy before. Commander, her tactical officer reported, we're losing battle stations 7 through 12. The enemy is using some kind of coordinated strike pattern. Our defense computers can't predict their movements. Nixara understood what was happening. Each species in the rebel fleet was fighting according to their own nature, but somehow they were all working together. The humans had done something the Empire thought impossible. They had turned diversity into strength. High Counselor Velthar appeared on the communication screen, his 6 eyes burning with desperate fury. Commander Nixara, the Council has authorized the use of the Omega Protocol. You will activate the system immediately. Nixara felt her blood freeze. The Omega Protocol was the Empire's ultimate weapon, a device that could destroy entire star systems. It had been built centuries ago as a final resort against threats to Etherean civilization, but using it now would kill billions of innocent beings across multiple worlds. High Counselor, the weapon will destroy not just the rebel fleet, but also the 17 inhabited systems in this sector. Millions of our own people will die. The Empire must survive, Velthar replied coldly. Activate the weapon now. That is a direct order. Nixara walked slowly to the Omega control station. Around her, the battle continued to rage as rebel ships broke through the outer defenses. She could see human fighters weaving between the crystal towers, their pilots showing the same desperate courage that had marked their species from the beginning. Her hands hovered over the activation controls. One touch would end the rebellion and preserve the Empire. But it would also prove that everything the humans had said about Etherean rule was true. They would win by committing the greatest act of genocide in galactic history. Captain Jiang Sua's ship had penetrated the inner defenses and was approaching the command station. Through the viewports, Nixara could see the young human pilot at her controls, fighting with skill and determination to protect her friends and allies. Just like Captain Lee had tried to protect the colonists 5 years ago, the memory of that first encounter came flooding back. The human captain asking for the lives of others, not his own. The way he had positioned his small ship between the aliens and the colony vessel, knowing it meant certain death. That was when Nixara first realized that humans were different. From other species the Empire had encountered, they fought not for conquest or resources, but for each other. They had turned former enemies into allies, slaves into partners, fear into hope. And now they were asking her to make the same choice they had made so many times before. Nixara stepped back from the controls. I will not activate the weapon, she announced, her voice carrying across the command bridge. Her officers stared at her in shock. Commander, you have direct orders from the High Council. The High Council is wrong, Nixara replied. This is not strength. This is the fear of a dying tyrant. She turned to her communications officer. Okay, open a channel to all Etherean forces. This is Commander Nixara. I'm ordering all ships to stand down. The war is over. The word spread through the Etherean fleet like wildfire. Their own commander had surrendered rather than commit genocide. The Empire's final pillar of strength had crumbled, and with it, 10,000 years of absolute rule came to an end. 2 years after the fall of Nexus Prime, the crystal towers still gleamed against the darkness of space, but everything else had changed. Where once the halls had echoed with the commands of a single empire, now they buzzed with the voices of dozens of species working together as equals. Counselor Kim Haijin walked through the memorial gardens that had been built in the center of the station. The garden was a place of remembrance for all who had died in the war. From the first human colonists killed at Kepler to the Etherean soldiers who had fallen defending their beliefs. Flowers from 100 different worlds grew side by side, their colors mixing in ways that would have been impossible under the old empire. The children seemed to adapt faster than their parents, observed Counselor Nixara as she joined Kim near a fountain where youngsters from various species played together. A small human boy was teaching a young Vorthok how to skip stones across the water, while a Zephyrian child floated nearby, its gaseous form shifting colors with excitement. Kim smiled as she watched the scene. Children don't carry the weight of old hatreds, they just see friends to play with. The two former enemies had become unlikely partners in building the new Galactic Confederation. Kim had been elected as the first human representative to the governing council, while Nyxera had chosen to stay and help rebuild rather than flee with other Etherian loyalists who couldn't accept the new order. I received the exploration reports this morning, Kim said, pulling out a datapad. The joint missions are exceeding all expectations. The Terran Vorthok mining expedition found those rare crystals on Sigma-7, the Zephyrian human atmospheric. Research team made contact with 3 new species in the Outer Rim. Even the Mekatar are requesting to join future exploration missions. Nyxera nodded thoughtfully. It's remarkable how much more we accomplish when we work together instead of ruling over each other. The Empire spent centuries trying to control every aspect of galactic civilization. The Confederation has achieved more in 2 years by simply letting everyone contribute their strengths. They walked past a group of mixed-species engineering teams working on improvements to the station's systems. Human creativity combined with Etherian precision, Vorthok crystal technology merged with Mekatar cybernetics, and Zephyrian energy manipulation enhancing everything they touched. The results were innovations that no single species could have achieved alone. There's something I want to show you, Kim said, leading Nyxera toward one of the observation decks. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships of every shape and size docked at the station's ports. But what caught the eye was the construction site beyond them, where a massive new vessel was taking shape. The first true Confederation ship, Kim explained, designed by representatives from all member species, built with materials and technology from across the galaxy, will carry the first deep space exploration mission to the far rim, where we've detected signals that might indicate intelligent life. Nyxera studied the ship with professional interest. It was unlike anything she had seen before, combining elements from dozens of different design philosophies. Where Etherian ships were elegant and Vorthok vessels were crystalline, this new ship seemed to flow like living art, while maintaining the practical functionality that humans insisted upon. "What will you call it?" she asked. "The New Harmony," Kim replied. The crew selected the name by vote. They said it represents what we're trying to build, a different kind of harmony than what the Empire offered. Not the silence of submission, but the music of many voices singing together. Soft chime indicated an incoming message. Kim activated her communicator, and Admiral Park's voice filled the air. "Counselor Kim, we've received responses to our latest diplomatic broadcasts. 17 more species have requested to join the Confederation. We're sending delegations to meet with the Council next month." "Excellent news, Admiral. Please prepare the necessary arrangements." As the communication ended, Nyxera looked thoughtful. "Do you ever worry that we're growing too fast? The Empire took millennia to build its reach across the galaxy. The Confederation is expanding in years." Kim considered the question carefully. The Empire expanded through conquest and control. They had to move slowly because they faced resistance. At every step, we're expanding through invitation and cooperation. Species are asking to join us because they see something they want to be part of. A group of young adults walked past them, heading toward the docking bays. Kim recognized several of them as graduates from the new Confederation Academy, where students from all member species learn together before joining exploration missions, diplomatic corps, or scientific research teams. "Look at them," Kim said. "That young woman there is half human, half Etherian. Her parents met during the reconstruction efforts. The tall one with 4 arms is pure Etherian, but he grew up in a human colony after his family chose to stay when we offered amnesty. The crystalline being is 3rd-generation Vorthok, but she considers herself a citizen of the galaxy, not just her homeworld." Nyxera watched the diverse group with wonder. A new generation that never knew the Empire's rule. They think cooperation is normal. "That's the point," Kim replied. "We're not just changing governments or political systems. were changing how species think about each other. Instead of seeing differences as threats, they see them as opportunities to learn and grow. As the day shift ended and artificial evening fell across the station, the two counselors stood watching ships depart for distant worlds.
Oh.
Some carried trade goods, others bore diplomatic missions, and still others headed out simply to explore the unknown reaches of space. The stars that had once bowed to a single empire's will now blazed with the light of countless possibilities,